Okay. Now, let's say you wrote your job specs, you wrote your person specs, you've advertised the job, and people are starting to apply. What you would probably do is you would start with an interview. And we have to talk about the interview a little bit here because there's a couple of things to say. First of all, why? Why an interview? It is a two-way process. I bet you didn't know that. Right. It's for the company to find an applicant, but it's also for the applicant to determine whether he wants to work there or not. And if you do an interview, I would invite you to remember this. It is a two-way thing. You should ask questions too. You should get answers to your questions during the interview because you are interviewing them as well. You're interviewing the company too. We have different types of interviews. We have an individual interview, which is called one-to-one. We have a panel interview. Now this is more like two or three people. So you're facing 2 or 3 people across the desk. And then we have a selection board, which is kind of scarier, where you are going to be in front of a big group of people. And they're doing the interview. They're interviewing you. Advantages of interviews. Well, it's kind of easier. Right. More flexible. Can put people on the spot, right? If they ask you a question that you did not prepare, and you don't know how to answer. Aha, they know you can't do the job. So that's what they mean by on the spot. But they are, so I will say this is the advantages. Let's talk about disadvantages because there are many. And that's the problem, is that interviews is still like used 100% of the time, right? Every time you get a job, you almost every time have to do an interview. And there are problems with that. The first disadvantages is the scope is very limited. Oops. What do I mean? It's too short, too brief. You know, if you're trying to know if this is the perfect person for the job, quick 30 minutes conversation with them is not going to tell you all about that person if he really knows what he's talking about. You know, it's too short, it's too brief. The scope is extremely limited, so that's a kind of disadvantage. It's very artificial, right? It's very fake. You know, they know you're kind of pretending and you're trying to be somebody you're not, and it's the whole thing very artificial, very plasticky. Also, you could be very nervous during the interview and shake. And it doesn't really show who you really are. If maybe you're the best candidate for the job, but you're like really nervous during the interview. So this is not great. It's very artificial. There is a problem of first impressions. Now I'm writing it like this, but in the exam they may call it like this: halo and horns. And I guess this is a very British expression because I've never heard this before, but halo and horns means the first impression. And then people make a judgment, an initial impression, initial judgment that could be wrong. For example, if it could be good or could be bad. If you dress really well, if you smell nice, suddenly they're like, oh, he's the perfect candidate, but maybe you're not. You see, so first impression disadvantage. We have what's called the contagious bias. So this is when you do an interview, this is when you try to mirror everything, right? When somebody makes a joke, and so you make the same joke or a similar joke. You're trying to mirror them, right? Like that contagious thing. Also, stereotypes, right? Like, for example, about a country, if you're from a particular country, and in that country there's particular food that's famous, and then they say everybody from that country likes that food. That's a stereotype, right? Or maybe thinking that Asians are maybe shorter in height, and that's not necessarily true. You could have an Asian that's much taller than you. So stereotypes is a problem. And simply an incorrect assessment. Just the interview process has the wrong conclusion, simply. For example, if you have your CV written that you had very short time jobs, you had like 2 or 3 jobs within 1 year and last year, maybe they're going to think, oh, he's just going to quit after 2 months, but maybe that's not true at all. And we can also add an inexperienced interviewer, right? Because remember, in BT, we're not on the side of the candidate here. We're on the side of the company. We're trying to get the best people. So you want to think about that. Yeah. Does the person who's going to do the interview knows how to do a good interview?